Suicide bomb, everybody loves Israel. On a Tuesday, Israel goes in for retaliation, kills children and does other dreadful atrocities. Israel is the terrible person. There's no point in that. It's not going to lead to anything.
There is a huge distortion in the media here. Actually, they are looking for violence only. They are looking for bloodshed, and they are looking for headlines. They don't go behind the headlines. They don't want to know the roots of the problem. They are not concentrating on the daily living of 3 million Palestinians suffocated by the Israeli sanctions.
How often does the media tell the whole story? The process of how we get there is absolutely a crucial piece. And so often that's missed out. We just get facts without context.
But if you actually watch the way this dispute is reported, it would appear to be a struggle between two equal sides, more or less. Two sides who both have right on their side and both have wrong on their side, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Two forces, as they're often described, struggling over the same bit of land. Well, this is a gross oversimplification in my view.
The real influence of the media is not in articles. It is in the way you write the news, the terminology of the news, the angle of reporting. Media report things which happen. If you don't kill somebody, you are not news.
It's one of the most important stories in television news, the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. And enormous amounts of care and attention are devoted to reporting it accurately and fairly.
But increasingly, that coverage is subject to a litany of criticism and complaints. Reports presented to the viewing public as balanced, neutral and objective can conceal crucial omissions and biases.
In this film, we're going to point out some of the important distinctions, and we provide some examples of a more creative approach, suitable for a British television news operation serving a general audience.
We begin with two very different versions of the same story. A story which presents journalists with a set of options. Options which carry consequences for our understanding of the conflict and the way it works.
Hello and welcome to News from the Holy Land. I'm Annabelle McGoldrick.
And I'm Jake Lynch. These few square miles must be among the most bitterly contested patches of ground anywhere on Earth, and the events that take place here are certainly some of the most intensively reported by the world's media.
Above all, it's the regular exchanges of violence that make the headlines, like the horrifying suicide bombing that took place in Israeli West Jerusalem in August 2003. Jake's report begins from the scene of the explosion.
Carnage on the streets of Jerusalem, the worst suicide bombing here in more than a year. Israelis despairing now that they can ever be safe in their homes. Members of this Orthodox Jewish community have already raised calls for Arabs to be forcibly moved out of East Jerusalem, the border just a few hundred yards from the scene of the blast. Rescue workers pulling survivors from the wreckage and collecting whatever traces they could find of the dead. This, the man responsible for the horror, a 29-year-old schoolteacher from Hebron. The extremist group Hamas sent him out to kill, in revenge, they said, for attacks on their leaders, and to send a message: no compromise in peace talks with the Israelis.
The dialogue among Palestinians is the key element of our strength, and nobody can stop this dialogue unless he is intending to break the Palestinian unity.
Today, the numbingly familiar routines of mourning. They're calling it the massacre of the children. A high proportion of the victims were under 10 years old, returning from the old city where they'd gone to pray with their parents. Their killer had disguised himself as one of them. He was strapped into a massive bomb packed with fragments of metal to inflict the maximum deadly effect.
There is no doubt that decisions will be made today. Already we have closed the Palestinian areas, and we will postpone the transfer of Palestinian cities to the Palestinian Authority. but the Israeli government will have to decide how to further react to this wanton act of terrorism.
Israel's President Moshe Katsav visiting the wounded in hospital. Israel has already announced a suspension of all contacts with the Palestinians as she mulls over possible military reprisals.
This devastating blow shattered a period of relative calm here, when progress on the latest peace plan, the American-sponsored roadmap, began to seem possible. Now any prospect of peace between Israelis and Palestinians appears as faint and distant as it's ever been. It all leaves Abu Mazen, the beleaguered Palestinian Prime Minister, unsure which way to turn. He's facing renewed demands to crack down on militant groups. Whether he's strong enough to do it, many here doubt. Well, that's a fairly standard report on a violence incident of the kind that have kept on winding up this conflict in recent years. It tells us broadly what we'd expect from a news report, the who, what, where, when and how of what happened. But there's another question journalists are supposed to answer, the why. Annabelle reports now from the scene of the blast in West Jerusalem.